This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
And welcome to the Start Spreading the News Yankee Show. Sometimes when we are doing the producing and the production and all of that at the same time, I click on the wrong thing. I saw the NESSP logo and it was just a logo. It wasn't the introduction. So anyway, here I am, Dr. Paul Semendinger with my buddy, Dr. EJ Fagan, and we are here to have our typical Yankee talk day here on the Start Spreading the News show, which of course comes every Monday here on the Northeast Streaming Sports Network at 9 p.m. EJ, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Paul. I hope everybody had a wonderful holiday, and let's get ready for the new year.
Let's get ready for the new year. You know, before we move on, did you get anything baseball related or Yankees related?
I did not get anything baseball related. I gave my father a copy of a virtual reality, not really game, but program that lets you bat against real major league pitchers.
Oh,
so they feed in Statcast data from the actual major league games. You can put yourself in any stadium, and you can see what a Garrett Cole fastball looks like.
Is that the thing with he has to put the big glasses on?
Yeah, well, it's a big VR headset, so it uses an Oculus Quest 2. My family, we all have them, and so we occasionally will kind of meet up in virtual reality and play mini golf. But yeah, it's cool. You can also attach a bat, your controller, to a real bat. Just a little sleeve you put over a bat.
I've seen commercials for this thing, right?
Yeah, and Paul, I'm worried my father is going to, pull all of his muscles using it. But you're an actual, still an actual athlete. You should give it a try. It's called Win Reality, is the name of the program. But you have to have an Oculus headset, which is the more.
All right, so let's just for the listeners and for my own edification. So how much is one of those headset things?
I don't know what they're going for now. I think they've increased the price. I got mine for $200 a year ago.
All right, and how much is Win Reality?
It's like $25. It's not very much.
Oh, all right. So for like $250, you can pull off the whole thing.
Yeah, and the headset's good for lots of stuff. It's a cool little toy. It's not gonna launch a new universe like I think some of the company who puts it out thinks it's going to, but it's a fun little toy. It's got some fun games. I play a lot of mini golf with my friends and my family. I play a little Beat Saber, that kind of thing. So it's a cool game. And now we got baseball. I've never tried the baseball app yet.
Is it possible for your dad to get a hit off?
I don't think he will be getting a lot of hits off of anybody, but it'd be cool to watch, right?
It'd be cool to watch. I'm wondering, can you pick the speed of the pitches that are coming in?
Yeah. So you don't just have to face major league batters, you hitters. You can face a lot of different things. But some Major League Baseball players, at least they advertise that they use it. So I think Paul Goldschmidt says that he uses it to see pitches. And it's not that high fidelity. It's not the best graphics in the world. So I suspect it's not super sharp. You're not going to see the spin on a baseball or anything like that. But, I wouldn't be shocked if a couple of years from now, if this is common in, Yankee spring training, you're going to see lots of guys in VR goggles practicing against whatever, Justin Verlander.
That's pretty cool. I like it. All right. So I got something too. You gave a gift. I got a gift. And believe it or not, it's not Yankees related. It's about a different team. I'm going to show it off in a moment. But do you have any guess? Then I don't know of any way you'd even have a guess.
I have no idea. How about, I don't know, a new book about a former Yankee legend?
That would be a good thing, like the Roy White book. But I
think that'd be a wonderful Christmas gift. Yeah, pre-order.
That would have been a great Christmas gift. If anybody still wants to get the Roy White book, it obviously comes out in April, but you can still pre-order it, obviously. From Compton to the Bronx. Look at this little self-promotion here. Roy White's book written with me. All right. Yeah. So I got something. It's actually a uniform. So that narrows it down to 29 other teams. Pick a random team that you wouldn't expect.
Oh, Jackie Robinson, Brooklyn Dodgers.
Ooh, that's an interesting one. So
that's what I would pick. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one, but it's not Jackie Robinson. I'm going to come right back. Give me about 32 seconds. You can talk to people while.
Give me a clue. Give me a clue on the team.
All right, so all right, so you're gonna throw a bunch of ideas out. If I give you a clue on the team, you'll then have to also, as I'm getting this ready, think of the player on that team. So as you think about a team, it's a team that won a World Series in the 1970s.
Only the 1970s? All right. Well, I'm alone now. Paul is not here, and so I need to pick a team that won the World Series in the 1970s. Now, I think the Phillies didn't win it in the 70s. So I don't think it's a Mike Schmidt jersey. The knowing Paul, I think that wouldn't be a bad choice. You got the Yankees in the late 70s, but obviously he's not picking that. I'm going to go Cincinnati Reds. I'm guessing he has a big red machine shirt of some kind. And when he gets back in, since I think he just accidentally closed out the window, we're going to learn that this is a Joe Morgan shirt. No, this is a Johnny Bench shirt. I'm going Johnny Bench. It's the Pirates. It's the Pirates. Is this a... I don't know who would be on. I mean, is this a? I don't know. Paul.
It's number.
This is Roberto Clemente. He's the only player
39. It's not Roberto Clemente.
Who else is on those teams?
All right. So here's the story. On May 7th, I'm going to be running the Pittsburgh Marathon with my oldest son, and we thought it might be fun if we were wearing Pittsburgh stuff. So my favorite Pirate of all time was a guy by the name of Dave Parker. In 1979, I was 11. The Yankees, when I started becoming a baseball fan, won the World Series every year, which was really just 2 years, 77 and 78. 79 rolls around, and that's a disastrous year for the Yankees. Thurman Munson dies. And, the World Series comes around. I have to pick a team to root for. Well, the Pirates were an easy team to root for. They were fun. They had these really cool black and gold uniforms. And so Ryan said, Dad, let's get you a Dave Parker jersey for you to wear during the marathon. So I've never had Pirates gear. It's a little bit weird, but I love it. I think it's a cool jersey.
Great looking uniform. It's the only team where the bridge matches the uniform, which I appreciate.
Yes.
And I'm very jealous because I've never been to Pittsburgh, and I would love to go see a baseball game there.
And we're going to go see a game the night before the race. The Pirates are home. Silly thing. It's the Pittsburgh Pirates. And who do you think they're playing that night? It's not the Yankees.
Let's say the Pirates are playing the New York Mets.
You would think, right? No, the Pirates are playing the Toronto Blue Jays.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's a weird one. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So weird. So, which made me think, EJ, wouldn't it be kind of fun if we spent a little time just talking about some of our favorite non-Yankees position by position? And then if you want to talk about them for a second or two, we could do that too. But let's just go. I'll say the position. You say the player. And if you want to pick a couple at that position, you can. There are no real rules here. But anyway, so first base, your favorite non-Yankee.
Yeah, it's a tough one because it's not really a flashy position. You didn't see a lot of highlights at first base. You saw some players you like more than others. I love Albert Pujols. I think Albert Pujols, when I was growing up, was the best player in the world. He was a guy who could bat .330 with 50 home runs reliably. He was actually a pretty good defensive third baseman when he finally moved over there until he slowed down a little bit in his old age. The way he ended his career, the very end was nice with the 700 home runs and the comeback season toward the end. But I think Albert Pujols, the memory of Albert Pujols is ill-served by the trajectory of his career, where, even considering the bad last 8 years or so, he was one of the very best players of all time. And I'm going to miss him.
That's a great pick. You just brought up something that I just wrote about a couple of weeks ago, and it's going to be published with the Internet Baseball Writers this week at some point. In 1974, before your time and before my time even, the Yankees made the most amazing trade of all time. That because the players' trajectories, basically after the point of that trade, both fell off. And they became just mediocre baseball players, and they continued maybe for 5-6 years each more, but without any real greatness, that the magnitude of that trade gets lost. But it was in 1974, the Yankees traded Bobby Mercer. And I'll just do this real quickly, but he was really the next Mickey Mantle that the Yankees had. From Oklahoma, center fielder. He was an all-star a number of times. He had received MVP votes. He was one of the stars in the American League. Bobby Mercer was great, and he wasn't as good as Mickey Mantle, of course, but he was the next Mickey Mantle, like the hope was, at least. And the Yankees traded him to the San Francisco Giants for the next Willie Mays, who wasn't quite Willie Mays, but he was one of the great players in the National League, Bobby Bonds. And because of their career trajectories, people don't remember the magnitude of what that trade was. It was like Mantle for Mays, light, if you will. But then they both basically never really achieved those same heights that they were at the moment that the trade was made. And so it's not quite remembered the way I think it would have been or was. I was too young to understand it at the time. I was 6. I didn't know what baseball was, but it was a huge, huge trade at the time. And because of the fact that they didn't do great afterwards, it's sort of obscured nowadays. But that was some blockbuster at the time. And believe it or not, people like to point out Catfish Hunter. The signing of Catfish Hunter is the moment where you say, like, George Steinbrenner was all in. He actually made the Bonds trade like 2 months before that. The Bonds trade came first. That was the first time that the Yankees were going after all the great talent. Anyway, first base, I'm going to pick my dear uncle's favorite player, who really was an outfielder, but he played a lot of first base, and that would be Stan Musial. Can't help but pick Stan the man. All right, second base.
It's a tough one because there's not a lot of very memorable players at second base, at least during my time. I can't name in the last 15 years a second baseman that wasn't a Yankee that really stands out. And so you just got to go to the guy you saw in the highlights, and that was Rod Carew.
That's who I picked.
One of the great all-time singles hitters or singles and doubles hitters. Player who's still around baseball. He's actually still someone that I think pops in the clubhouses now and then. And I think will be criminally underrated because he didn't hit a lot of home runs.
Yes. And when I saw Rod Carew play, he was primarily a first baseman, because I saw him at the tail end of his career. But when he came up, and for a long time, he played second base. And when I was thinking about second baseman, if I had to pick a second baseman, probably would be Rod Carew. The only other guy I thought of, I have a hard time picking guys who are on other teams who I've rooted against. I did think about Lou Whitaker and Alan Trammell making that double play combination, and I liked those guys growing up when I was watching baseball, but they were always doing good things and beating the Yankees. So I had to be mad at them. So that was hard for me to pick them. So shortstop.
I mean, a player who was almost a Yankee, who is the best defensive shortstop that I've ever seen, it's Andrelton Simmons.
Interesting.
At the peak of his powers, Andrelton Simmons was an amazing player to watch. He could make plays that no one else in the world that I've ever seen has ever been able to make. And, for a little bit of for a hot second, he was able to hit. And I wonder if the juice ball stuck around, if he'd still be a pretty good hitter. He's not that old, and he's still a pretty good defensive shortstop. But, didn't really have the staying power that I think a lot of Hall of Fame types would be. But there was a period of time where he looked like Ozzie Smith, right? He looked like he was going to be the defensive shortstop who makes the Hall of Fame on defense, which is very rare. Just a wizard. Just absolutely loved watching Andrelton Simmons, and maybe one day he'll be a Yankee. Maybe he'll come back.
Yeah, that's a very interesting pick. I actually picked the guy who you mentioned, Ozzie Smith. A great player. Lots of fun. Used to watch This Week in Baseball, and in the beginning of the credits, they always showed Ozzie running out and doing a backflip. Hey, my goodness, that's something I always wish I could have done. So, yeah, Ozzie Smith. Third base.
Another really good defensive player, much better offensive player, fun player to watch, a player who only spent, luckily, 1 year on the Boston Red Sox. His name is Adrian Beltre. I love Beltre since that big breakout season he had in 2004 with the Dodgers. Just a joy to watch. Incredible player. He's going into the Hall of Fame. Probably could have continued playing. He was just productive up until the end. And you want a third baseman to make the big move. You want the guy to make the claw play, on a bunt or go, range past the bag into foul territory. And that was Adrian Beltre. And he can hit home runs on top of that.
Great choice. Let me just see. I'm trying to do two things at once here. My pick was a Red Sox. For those of you who don't know, my dad is a lifelong Red Sox fan, raised me the right way, let me pick whatever team I wanted to pick. I told my kids they'd all be Yankee fans. They didn't have to be, of course, but they picked the right team. But my dad never forced me to be a Red Sox fan. Thank goodness. But one of his favorite players was Rico Petrocelli. And we used to play a game called All Pro Baseball. It's sort of like Stratomatic. I'm going to pull up a image here real fast if I can get it. Yep. This is the Dave Winfield card. But you had a spinner, and if it landed, well, it would spin and land in one of those numbers, and each of those numbers did something. And Rico Petrocelli was always the guy my dad picked to be his third baseman. And so I grew up thinking that Rico Petrocelli was a great third baseman. And when I think of great third baseman, I think of Rico Petrocelli. The other guy I would have picked, if not for him, I would have picked Mike Schmidt. We have the Dave Parker jersey, or I have the Dave Parker jersey here. And that was 1979 and 1980. The Yankees were not in the World Series, so I rooted for the Phillies and loved Mike Schmidt. All right, left field.
It's tough because the player I really want to pick was with the Yankees. Even if I, as somebody who wasn't alive at the time, don't think of Ricky Henderson as a Yankee. But Ricky Henderson would be that player, one of the most fun players in baseball history. And it's also not a position that you really think of a lot of kind of star players in. I can name a lot of right fielders that are real interesting. But on left field, I mean, I don't really know who to name other than Barry Bonds. Most dominant player of all time. I mean, right when I was a teenager, he was unbeatable. I mean, just leagues ahead of everybody else. Yes, he was probably taking steroids during that time, but so were a lot of his competition, and they weren't as good as he was. I mean, those 4 years in San Francisco, I mean, I would only see the highlights on SportsCenter. Right? I couldn't watch those games in the early 2000s. But there's never been a player that dominant in the history of the sport, and it was incredible.
Yeah, he may be the greatest hitter of all time and a great defensive player. And again, we've talked about this, but I think the fact that he was so good is what's kept him out of the Hall of Fame.
I agree.
He broke baseball.
And he was so good that he's the one who caused the backlash to steroids.
Yes.
Right? Like everybody knew steroids were in the game when Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa and everybody and lots of other guys were hitting home runs, and Roger Clemens was effective into his 40s, and you can go down the list. But it wasn't until Barry Bonds said, like, well, I can do that too, that you took a guy who was already maybe the best player of his generation and just turned it into a mockery of baseball. And that's what made caused the whole steroids regime.
That's correct. And that's why people got so angry. All right. So in left field, I have to pick my dad's favorite player, Teddy Ballgame, Ted Williams, number 9. My dad grew up loving Ted Williams. His brother, as we said, grew up loving Stan Musial. That was 1946 that they both decided to become baseball fans. They're both still baseball fans, 84 and a half years old and counting. And my uncle's still a diehard Cardinal fan, and my dad's a diehard Red Sox fan. But my dad loves Ted Williams, and as a result, so do I. So Ted Williams would get the call. Now, this is going to be an interesting position, center field. I'm interested to see who you have. We might have the same guy.
I mean, it's Mike Trout. And I feel very privileged that I get to watch. I've gotten to watch Mike Trout and be a big baseball fan, a cognizant baseball fan his entire career. I was still writing a lot about baseball back when he came up, and I remember debating him versus Miguel Cabrera for the Rookie of the Year award. I remember when we all realized, like 2 or 3 seasons in, that he was having this incredible start to his career, and it's a little sad that injuries have kind of kept him off the field recently. When he's on the field, he's still one of the top 2 or 3 players in the game. But now he's not on the field, and that's really sad. And it's kind of tough to watch his decline years. But if you think about how good Aaron Judge was, Mike Trout was almost that good for about 7 years in a row. From the moment he was 20 years old in the major leagues. It's been incredible, and it is a crime that the Angels can't put a good team around him and make the playoffs.
So I saw something that's a couple weeks ago. We talked about Fernando Tatis as an out of the box, ridiculous. Could they really do it? I saw some crazy rumor that Mike Trout would be willing to go to the Yankees right now. So let's just take that as a thought here. If you were the Yankees, knowing his injury history right now, but knowing his talent level, I mean, what a difference maker, right? Would you try to acquire, if he was available, Mike Trout?
I would, but I wouldn't pay too much for him because it's a bad contract. I mean, like, given how much he's getting injured lately, it's not a great contract. That said, I wonder what a smart baseball team could do with Mike Trout. Could a smart baseball team keep him healthy? I think so. The Angels are not a good baseball team. They're bad at running a baseball franchise. And yeah, I mean, I think if I don't care what the cost is. Like, I think if Mike Trout's available, you go for it. But you don't. I don't think you give up Anthony Volpe for Mike Trout, right? I mean, if the Angels want to get out from under that contract and they want to take Aaron Hicks back or something like that, go for it. But I don't think you.
Dominguez? Is Dominguez in a trade for
Yeah,
Mike?
I mean, like, those are the types of things I think I'd be fine with. You know, I just don't think that he has a lot of surplus value on top of the money. But you know, if Mike Trout wants to play in New York, you know, he doesn't have to play every day to be worth $40 million. He's that good. It's amazing if you still look at his stats, right? He is still one of the fastest players in baseball. He's 30. Still one of the fastest players in baseball. Still has some of the best strikes out of zone judgment in the game. Is still a supreme defensive center fielder. Yeah, like, move out of the way if Mike Trout wants to stick around.
He's younger than Aaron Judge, right?
I think he is younger than Aaron Judge, and I think he's better than Aaron Judge.
Yeah, except for last year.
Except for last year, but for every other year, Trout's better. And you know, if I had to guess who's going to stay, I think Mike Trout's going to age well because he's so athletic. You know, he's a New Jersey guy, best player in the history of New Jersey, and so I don't think this is going to happen.
No, I prefaced it with that, but let's just assume. All right, so the Yankees get Mike Trout. They have Harrison Bader, obviously. Do you make Mike Trout your left fielder, or do you make Harrison Bader your left fielder?
I think you probably make Trout your left fielder. I don't think there's a big difference in, like, injury risk between left and center. I don't think that really matters very much. I don't think it tires you out to be in left more. I think Bader's probably a slightly better defensive center fielder, though I don't really think it matters. I think either way, you're in pretty good shape. I think there's a question of whether or not if you get Trout, like we're discussing it, that, you know, Bader is a tough one to. It's tough to have to see Harrison Bader's kind of place on the team when you have someone like Trout on the team.
Well, Yankees need a left fielder. We're going to talk about that later. So that answers your problem. You just have a question of which of the two goes to left.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think it's going to happen.
No, neither do I. But how fun is that to think about?
The Angels are for sale.
Yes.
So you think about Ohtani, who's only got 1 year left on his contract. You know, Ohtani could fetch a lot on the trade market, but if if some owner wants to buy the Angels, I think he's more that owner probably wants to either be the one to trade Trout and Ohtani, or would like them on the team.
Unless you somehow work it out that you're going to buy the team. You don't want to do like the Derek Jeter thing and get the team and then trade the superstar. So you basically say, make sure those guys are gone by the time I buy the team, so you get the bad hit and I can come in, as the hero and save the team from the bad decisions you made. All right, so for center field, I picked Willie Mays. I don't think he should be on the Yankees right now. So, but the say hey kid, got to pick the say hey kid. Right field, I'll go first. Dave Parker. There he is, right here. Who'd you get?
So this is a player that if he there's one player who did spend a little bit of time with the Yankees late in his career, who would be my easy pick if he hadn't. I wonder if you can guess who's my all-time favorite. Forget Yankee, non-Yankee, all-time favorite right fielder of all time.
All right, so spent just a little bit of time as a Yankee.
Late in his career, spent a little bit of time as a Yankee. Is somebody who I grew up with and watched play and just absolutely
Lance
loved watching.
Berkman.
No, it was Ichiro Suzuki.
Oh my God, that's
right?
that's Ethan's favorite player. Yes.
Other than one player who we might name soon, there has been no player I've ever had as much fun watching as Ichiro. He was a unique baseball player. He had the swing that was designed to leg out singles at first base, and he could do it. And he could also play right field and was incredible and had this gun for an arm. I mean, just an incredible baseball player in every respect. I wish we had StatCast on him when he was young. I'd love to see some of those stats. Was just an incredible baseball player. Had the magic wand, but he was a Yankee. He spent a couple of years with New York, one of which was pretty good. It's actually kind of fun to watch, and actually continue to play baseball for quite a while after that. And so the question is, who else would be my favorite right fielder? And I'm going to go Tony Gwynn.
Oh, that's another good pick.
We often talk a lot here. We talk about how home runs and strikeouts and three-true outcomes. That's the way to win baseball games, and that's true. But it's not the most fun to watch. And Tony Gwynn's brand of baseball is fun to watch. I'd love to see Tony Gwynn in today's game, especially now the shifts are gone. I wonder if that would if he'd do really well. And I just love Tony Gwynn. Tony Gwynn's the best.
It's a great pick. All right. Catcher, I had a very hard time with.
Oh, really? I have an easy pick here.
So my two catcher choices, I picked two, and I'll explain why I picked them both, but neither one will make any sense, and you've probably never heard of either of them. One of them, though, was a manager. Maybe you heard of him as a manager. But when I think of catcher, non-Yankee, I think of Carlton Fisk. No way. What are you kidding? I hate that guy because Munson hated him, right? I can't like Carlton Fisk. He might be the nicest guy in the world. Never met him, of course. And then I think of Johnny Bench. And then I think of the 76 World Series and how Sparky Anderson insulted all the Yankees and even Thurman Munson. He said Munson was really good, but the best catcher's Johnny Bench. And that upset the Yankees. That upset Thurman Munson. So I can't pick Johnny Bench. So even though he was a good guy too. So then I just end up like, I don't know who to pick. So my picks are kind of obscure and strange. So who'd you pick?
Well, there's another player who was briefly a Yankee catcher who, before he came to the Yankees, was my favorite catcher in the league. I love watching
Ivan Rodriguez is your choice.
No, not Pudge Rodriguez, but around in the same era, Russell Martin.
Oh, okay.
Canadian man, and was looked like a catcher. He had that kind of weird, stocky build that, but still very athletic, could steal bases. Was a great game caller. He's actually not that old. I would love to see him come out of retirement, but he's not going to do that. I love watching Russell Martin. I was thrilled when the Yankees traded for him. I wish they kept him around for a little bit longer. I love good defensive catchers. I love a catcher who takes the lead, who's kind of the man who's, sees himself as the leader of a pitching staff. And to me, that's the guy who just retired, is going to the Hall of Fame, Yadi Molina.
Oh, good choice too. Yeah,
amazing player. I mean, I wish they could have brought him. The Yankees could have brought him over late in his career, but still, stuck around his entire career in St. Louis. Pitched with Adam Wainwright a ridiculous number of times, or caught Adam Wainwright a ridiculous number of times, and could actually hit. For a long period of his career, he was a pretty good batting average guy. Could actually hit pretty well. The best of the Molina brothers. I love that there were three Molinas. I don't know if you ever watched SportsCenter about 10 years ago, but they used to play Guess the Molina, which I always loved. Which was always a fun little quick aside. Is that Benji? Is that Jose? Is that Yadier? He's the last one remaining, and again, he's going to the Hall of Fame as a catcher, and that's going to be it's going to be a fun speech to watch. Absolutely.
All right, so here's my two picks. You probably never heard of either of these guys. This guy was once a manager. I had this baseball card, 1968 Topps, Russ Nixon. And he, as you can see, he was a catcher. So I didn't quite understand. His name was Nixon, the president was named Nixon. And I couldn't quite process all that in my head. But anyway, I remember that baseball card. I think that was the only card I had from 1968, which happens to be the year I was born. So I liked Russ Nixon as a catcher. I didn't really know much about him. And then there was another catcher named Glenn Borgman, who was from Oakland, New Jersey. And my dad took me to Valley Middle School where he was a teacher because Glenn Borgman was there one evening talking to some kids. And I just remember he was the first Major League Baseball player I ever met. So most people never heard of Glenn Borgman, but he was a catcher. And so I would have to pick those guys among my favorites. The third guy would be Tyler Flowers. And Tyler Flowers. Yeah. So the story with Tyler Flowers, I have his baseball card in a frame because the day before Ethan, my youngest son, went to college, he said, "Dad, let's go for a walk." And we went up for a walk, and we went and sat at the baseball field where we used to sit oftentimes in open baseball card packs. And he took out a box of baseball cards. I'm going to cry here in a minute. So we'll tell the story quickly because it gets me right here. And he said, Dad, let's open packs one last time before I go off to college. And so we did, and we opened up all the packs from a box of cards that he had gotten. And the very last card of the very last player I pulled from the very last time I opened cards with my kid before he went to college was Tyler Flowers. So he was a catcher.
Nice.
So he'd be on there. All right. So those are the catchers, all pretty obscure on my end. If you could pick a starting pitcher,
Shohei Ohtani.
I mean, he might be a Yankee.
He might be a Yankee one day. I hope he will. He is.
I
hope he has a long career in the major leagues, and I hope he hits 500 home runs. I mean, what can you say about Shohei Ohtani? It is the most incredible story of my lifetime in baseball, and is you can't get more fun than what Shohei Ohtani is doing. It is absurd that he is able to do both as well as he does. And it's absurd that no one else has been able to do it. There's a lot of really good athletes who play the sport of baseball, but only one of them is, a top 30 hitter and a top 10 pitcher.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. If you go to Start Spreading the News, by the way, I have a great article up today that compares Ohtani to Babe Ruth.
Nice.
And I'll give you the quick overview of that article. Today, everybody knows Babe Ruth was one of the great players of all time, if not the greatest player of all time, blah, blah, blah. But when you hear the story of Babe Ruth today, it comes with a lot of qualifiers where they say Babe Ruth was the best, but you know what? They didn't have night games. You know what? It was pre-integration. You know what? They didn't have relief pitching. He never had to travel to the West Coast. And there's all these, the level of play wasn't quite as good. And there's always like a qualifier against Babe Ruth. And we almost have to knock him down a couple notches. And there have been a lot of articles I've seen, or numerous articles that say Ohtani's better than Babe Ruth ever was. And I just looked at their statistics. They both had 2 seasons primarily where they both played as a pitcher and a hitter. Ohtani's going to get his 3rd season like that this coming season, which will make him have 1 more year than Ruth ever had. But their innings pitched over those first 2 years are very similar, like within a couple of innings of each other. But I make the point that if we're going to denigrate a lot of what Babe Ruth did because of all these other mitigating factors, he did something that Shohei Ohtani has never done. And I think the number is 554-0. Is Babe Ruth had 554 chances in the field as a player, as a center fielder, a right fielder, a left fielder, a first baseman. And Ohtani's never had to play in the field. And I just make the argument that maybe if Babe Ruth had had an opportunity to be a DH, he might have been able to continue to do what Ohtani's doing today. He wouldn't have had to play the field and pitch. He could have DH'd and pitched like Ohtani. So it's just a little different take on the whole thing.
Yeah, we talked about in the last episode, so I don't want to belabor it. But the incredible thing is nobody in between the two of them, separated by 100 years, did it.
Correct. The pitcher I pick is the guy who was the great pitcher. One guy, and he was rumored to be a Yankee, come to the Yankees a couple times towards the end of his career. You almost hate to admit that you like a Met, but got to go with Tom Seaver. So anybody out of the bullpen for you, EJ?
This is a tough one because there aren't a lot of relievers to pick from. You could say like Trevor Hoffman or something like that. But I'm going to pick a player. You tell me, you stop me once you figure this out. Much more obscure player. Notable but obscure. He was a Yankee farmhand but never played in the major leagues with the New York Yankees. He is one of the few players in sports history to have a rule made up to stop him. One of my other favorite athletes of all time was Martin Brodeur. The National Hockey League put a trapezoid behind the net to stop him from stick handling. But this player, he had a rule made up after his first professional appearance in Low A Staten Island.
I can't get his Pat
Venditti.
Venditti. Yes, the lefty righty guy. That's a great choice.
One of those just incredible feats of baseball that you're never going to see again, or at least that's just once in a lifetime, just performance. I mean, this is a guy who from basically like middle school, his dad had him throw both lefty and righty, and he wasn't that great of a lefty thrower, but he was good enough. Threw kind of a sidearm, low 80s fastball, kind of a frisbee, and then he had low 90s kind of standard stuff as a right-handed pitcher. Had a special glove that had a thumb in the middle, so he could switch it. So he had an extra thumb on either side, so he could switch it from hand to hand. And the first time he ever had a major league plate appearance, it was against a switch hitter at Staten Island, the Staten Island Yankees. And he and the switch hitter went back and forth for 5 minutes, where he would put the glove on one hand and the switch hitter would go to the other side of the plate, and then back and forth. And they eventually create a rule that essentially the pitcher has to choose first. And so the batter will get the advantage, not the pitcher. The Pat Venditti rule, one of the great stories of all time, and has actually had a non-negligible major league career. He had a season with Oakland. He had a season with Toronto. He pitched 72 innings over the course of his major league career. Was kind of up and down from AAA. Was on a very good Dodgers team for a little bit. He made something of himself despite being not particularly great from the right side and actually pretty bad from the left side.
Yeah, awesome. There was a guy, Greg Harris, and at the time he played, there were two Greg Harrises, and I think he was Greg A. Harris, if I remember correctly, but he was an ambidextrous pitcher, and I think he pitched both ways in a major league game, or he was going to.
Anthony Siegler, Yankees catching prospect.
Yes, I was going to bring him up.
In high school. Yeah.
The relief pitcher I picked was my favorite relief pitcher, and people will hear this and say he picked another Met, but I'm not picking a Met. I'm picking a Philly. Going back to that 1980 World Series, Tug McGraw was just amazing. People don't know that Tug McGraw also wrote a comic strip, or had somebody ghostwrite a comic strip for him called Scroogey. And there were a couple of comic books that I used to have about Scroogey. It's sort of like a Charlie Brown type of comic, and it was great. So I always loved Tug McGraw. So that was a little fun trip into baseball history, non-Yankees related. EJ, you just put up a great article on your Substack page about a guy who I was thinking might be a possibility for the Yankees. And I've actually soured on him, but just to give a little background to my thought, and then I want you to expand. And I was thinking the Yankees need more left-handed hitting, and I was trying to think of where they could get left-handed hitting, and the place I see it as could be DH. And I thought, well, who's got a contract that the Yankees could maybe unload Giancarlo Stanton for in a one-to-one swap, a bad contract for a bad contract type of thing, a guy who's got a lot of money coming to him, but who isn't a right-handed DH, who might even be able to help in a different position. And I thought Stanton for Christian Yelich might be interesting. I've sort of soured on it, but you just wrote a piece about Christian Yelich, maybe coming to the Yankees in a big deal to be the left fielder. So why don't you talk about that?
Sure. And here's the background. The Yankees, there's two kind of interesting tidbits that we've heard about the Yankees. One is that Michael Conforto just signed a contract with the San Francisco Giants, 2 years, $36 million with an opt-out after the first year. That's a contract that I think the Yankees would probably have loved to have. He's a pretty good left-handed hitter. It's probably a 1-year deal. It's not for that much money. I think Conforto makes a lot of sense in the Yankees, and he already lived in New York and was successful in New York. And so unless he's really badly injured, and the Giants don't seem to think he is, it seems to make sense that the Yankees would sign Conforto, and they didn't. And because they didn't, I think we can either, maybe there's something like Conforto wanting to get out of New York, or really wants to live on the West Coast or something. But I think it's more likely that the Yankees have something in the works that's better than Conforto, that they'd rather have the Conforto. So that's not Max Kepler. It's not signing. I was looking at some names like Andrew McCutchen to a 1-year deal, anything like that. It's a player that's more notable. And we know that at least 2 weeks ago, Michael Kay mentioned on his show that he has heard that the Yankees are working on something bigger than Brian Reynolds. So Brian Reynolds is an option. We've talked about him on the show. We've heard some news that the Pirates don't want to trade him to the Yankees because the Yankees have position players and shortstops, and they're already set in the infield, and that makes sense. So maybe the Yankees are trying to work out a 3-way trade, or maybe they've given up on that. Or maybe they're trying to work on something a little bigger. We talked about Tatis briefly last time we recorded the show. And I think that the other player that is interesting here is Christian Yelich. Yelich, I think he makes sense on baseball terms. I think he's an interesting profile. He's not that bad of a contract. And I think most interestingly, I think the Brewers and the Yankees match up really well for a trade. So Yelich, you might remember him, former MVP winner, was second place in MVP the year afterwards, has had a rough couple of years, the last 2 years, kind of lost most of his power, signed a pretty big contract with the Brewers, but a pretty reasonable contract. It's got a $23 million average annual value, $25 million per year for the next 6 years. which is starting to look like not a bargain, but not that bad of a contract. And if he was hitting, a little bit better, I don't think he'd be tradable, but he's a pretty big contract. And the Brewers are in a spot where about most of their team is a free agent after the 2024 season. So they got 2 more years. That's most of their pitching staff, guys like Corbin Burns, Brandon Woodruff, Willie Adames. Those guys are gone. And so they're kind of in a win now mode. And they also don't really have an infield. They don't really have a third baseman. They don't really have a second baseman. And so maybe the Brewers would be interested in some of the Yankees infielders, and the Yankees would be interested in the left-handed hitting potential power hitter who's 31 years old, is on a reasonable contract for the next 6 years. And I think maybe the Yankees could do something with. Maybe the Yankees could get him back to hitting power. Maybe he can be a pull hitter. Maybe the short porch is something that looks pretty good for Christian Yelich. There's a downside. Christian Yelich was a very bad defensive player last year. He has previously been a good defensive player, but a player who's always gotten really bad jumps in the outfield. And he was just fast enough to make up for it. He lost a little bit of speed, still pretty fast, but lost a little bit of speed and was really no longer able to be a plus defensive outfielder last year. Maybe the Yankees can fix that. Maybe they can get him hitting for a little bit more power. And even if they don't, he was a pretty productive player, all things considered, because he takes walks, he hits a lot of singles, he hits the ball on the ground a lot, unfortunately. But maybe post shift, that's a little bit less of a problem. What would he take to get? It's always the question with trades. Probably not that much. It's a bad contract. If you go by the MLB trade value simulator, it's a big negative contract. So you might be able to give a Donaldson or a Hicks or something in return for him. I suspect that's probably unrealistic. I suspect if the Brewers make this trade, they want to make their team better. But you could imagine Donaldson or Gleyber Torres or Isaiah Kiner-Falefa making that team better. You could also imagine, them wanting to take on someone like an Aaron Hicks. In return for us taking most of his money. It's an interesting team to trade with, and I think the Yankees should think about it.
Would you do what I was talking about a couple of weeks ago, Stanton?
Yeah. I would get rid of Stan for anything, right? But I don't think that's realistic. Frankly, I just think Stan's contract is that much worse.
Is it? I think it's similar in value.
He's got a similar average annual value, but it's a backloaded contract. He's getting paid a lot of money, and I think Stan's just worse than Yelich. Right? Yelich can still play the field. He's been playing the field. He hasn't been playing it well this season, but played it well in previous seasons. He's still fast, where Stanton's one of the slowest players in the league, and he's a player you can dream on. You can maybe good coaching can fix him a little bit.
Interesting, because I was proposing that a number of weeks ago, and I've sort of talked myself out of it in the meantime. Ethan wrote a piece on Start Spreading the News last week examining left fielders, and he put up Yelich, and I read the piece, and I've been getting more and more down on it. But I would make that. You know what? As I'm thinking about it again here, you're starting to convince me that I would make that trade. The Yankees have to get more left-handed hitting in this lineup, and Yelich solves that, and he's. I can't imagine him being much worse or much more one-dimensional than Giancarlo Stanton. People who disagree say Stanton's going to be great.
He's a good leadoff hitter. Even without a lot of power, he's been a well above average hitter these last 2 years. He's also a guy that hits the ball really hard, like Giancarlo Stanton, like exit velocities. And this distance, I have a video on the post of him hitting a ball 500 feet. That's like the best case scenario for Yelich. And it's the thing that the Yankees kind of like, right? They like guys who put up, big exit velocity numbers. One thing is that there's a lot of players who are trapped on teams that you think, probably aren't getting the most out of that player. The Brewers aren't really one of those teams, right? They're a smart team. They tend to get a lot out of their players, but maybe Yelich just needs to change his scenery and maybe a little more, motivation and could be pretty good. Even if he's not great, he's only getting paid $23 million of average annual value. It's really not bad. I mean, he could be a 330 WOBA hitter, which is an above average hitter in today's baseball, and be pretty good. He's a star. He's a lefty. I think he fits this team really well, and I think there's some real upside. I mean, if you told me that Yelich, no matter what team he's on, wins the MVP next year, I wouldn't be shocked.
No, I would. He's had a couple of down years, and so That's what concerns me. That's how I talked myself out of it. Looking at his last couple of years, he had a good year in 2019, rabbit ball, yada yada yada, blah blah blah. So interesting. I go back and forth on this. Here's a different name that came up in the comments on the site the other day as a possible left fielder. Because a lot of the Yankee options are gone, right? They're looking at Yoshida, he's gone, and Conforto's gone, and Brandon Nimmo's gone, and the guy, I can't get his name, who just re-signed with the Astros, Brantley, is gone. All of a sudden, like, there was all these options and ideas of guys who could play left field for the Yankees, and really now it's Reynolds. That's the only guy they're talking about. But even on Major League Baseball trade rumors, they ran an article today about what's going to happen in left field. They're saying Aaron Hicks. Oh, my goodness. Please no.
I'd rather have Cabrera than Hicks.
Yes. And they mentioned Cabrera. I think the problem with Aaron Hicks, and I wrote about this about a week or so ago, and Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. I think the problem with both of those guys is if they're on the team, I don't know if Aaron Boone is the manager who's not going to play them. I think he falls into that, well, he was good and he could be good and he might be good again type of, and his defense looks real good. And if you twist these stats one way and look at him cross-eyed, he's actually the best shortstop in the league or whatever. Like, really? I just worry that veteran factor obscures the logical reasoning, and all of a sudden they're playing much more than they should. So, but here's a different name that came up. Of the Cubs, Ian Happ. What do you think about him?
I mean, I think he's a great player. I'm going to bring up his stats right now, but like, I don't think I'd be shocked if they trade him. The Cubs are in a weak division. They're trying to win, and Ian Happ is their best player. He's fast. He's, I will say he's not the best hitter in the world, but
not
he's
the best hitter. And if you look at his home and road splits.
He's a big improvement. He's better than anybody the Yankees have right now, and he's a really good defensive left fielder.
Look at his road and home and road splits from last year. I think he hit like 304 in Wrigley and probably like 230 on the road.
Wrigley isn't. Wrigley is not a weird ballpark, right? I mean, Wrigley is a place where people can hit home runs and the wind's blowing out. But it's not like it has a giant left field or something. It's not like it's Detroit or something where singles or doubles hitter really benefits. So I don't think that's a huge deal.
You wouldn't worry about that, okay?
I wouldn't worry. Look, he's a switch hitter. He could bat lead off. If he were traded, I don't think he'd be that expensive because he's not the best player in the world. He doesn't have that much time of team control left on him.
I think he's a free agent after this year,
and he's 28 years old. But again, I think he's a deadline deal. If the Cubs are out at the deadline, I could see them trading him. But they will trade him if they're out at the deadline, but not now.
All right, so let's just play that as a scenario for a moment then, because I have started to hear that like the Yankees don't necessarily need a left fielder to start the year. You could start the year with Aaron Hicks and Oswaldo Cabrera, and if they could do it, maybe Stanton plays out there one day a week or whatever, and if they can hold their own with those guys, you sort of see what happens. Maybe one of them breaks out and really does well, and Stanton stays healthy, or Cabrera adapts really well to the major leagues, or Aaron Hicks proves that he's 100% healthy and he's the player the Yankees have been hoping for the last number of years. Or any combination of those don't necessarily contribute to the Yankees being a bad team in the first half, and you wait till the trade deadline, and a guy like Ohtani, I can't see it, but becomes available because the Angels are out of it, or Ian Happ becomes available because the Cubs are out of it. Do you think it's a good strategy for the Yankees to sort of roll their dice with Hicks, Cabrera, Stanton, or whatever for the first half and wait for something, a new market to develop for a left fielder? Do you think it's
I don't think so. I think it's risky.
I do too. Okay.
The one thing is that you're counting on Harrison Bader to be healthy. He's not the healthiest player in the world, and so all of a sudden you could be down 2 in your depth chart. I don't think Aaron Hicks is really an option, frankly. They weren't really playing him like he was an option late in the year last year. Maybe that wrist injury heals a little bit and he gets a little bit better, but I don't think you should count on that. So I think there are stopgap type, kind of risky stopgap types that you could put out there. Brantley was one of those guys. I'd say Andrew McCutchen is one of those guys. Someone like that isn't a terrible option. There's some guys in the Yankee farm system that you might want to consider. Someone like Elijah Dunham would be kind of the defense first guy. The
Esteban Florial, he's out of options. So
I would not have a problem with punting on one position if the Yankees were really well set right now. But they're short a hitter. They're short a good hitter, a top of the lineup hitter. Right now, they have basically the lineup that was frustrating at the end of last year, like Gleyber Torres leading off or Judge leading off, with Rizzo right behind him, and then one of those other guys, and then Giancarlo Stanton and Josh Donaldson, and the Yankee lineup that's just not very good, and it relies on Aaron Judge being one of the best players of all time to be a 99-win team. Now they've improved their rotation. They'll hopefully have a pretty good bullpen next year. But they need another hitter at the top of their lineup. And that pushes Donaldson down, that pushes Stanton down, that gives you a little bit of leeway when guys get injured. I don't know who that is. It's left field's the obvious spot to make it happen. There's other positions where you could make it happen. Right? You could find some way to move around the infield. You could hope that Anthony Volpe turns into that player, which he certainly could pretty soon. I just don't. I don't think the Yankees can afford to ignore it. They need a leadoff hitter. They need a lefty. They need to turn Gleyber Torres into a 5-hitter and Donaldson into a 6-hitter. Right.
I want Donaldson batting 7th. In my perfect lineup, Donaldson bats 7th.
Or you can afford to sit Donaldson. Right. Like there's lots of versions of this team that's really good. And there's worlds where Oswaldo Peraza is that player. There's worlds where Volpe's that player. Elijah Dunham is that player. Elijah Dunham could be Brett Gardner. Entirely plausible. Very similar kind of players in a lot of ways. So, they have plan Bs, but the plan B can't be plan A. Left field is a weakness. And if you go into this season and rely on somebody at the trade deadline being available, you may have to trade a Volpe or a Peraza to get that player. And I don't think the Yankees want to be in that position. And you also have to count on the Cubs being bad, and they might not be bad. You got 3 wild card slots. Teams aren't going to be selling nearly as much. You can count on the Giants being bad and trading you Conforto, who you just missed out on. The reason why I think that something is happening is because Conforto was that guy. He was the perfect stopgap pick because he has the potential to be. The last time we saw him on a baseball field, he was great. Mm-hmm. He didn't have an injury that we were expecting is going to hold him back. And he was just that left-handed hitter who could bat in the bottom part of your lineup and you'd be comfortable with. I'm glad they didn't sign Andrew Benintendi, but Benintendi was another player who kind of fit that mold pretty well, which is why I think these Brian Reynolds talks are pretty real. And maybe the Tatis talks are something that at least went on at one point, and maybe Ian Happ is a guy that they're considering. I think those are all very strong possibilities. And so I don't think they're going to go in with Oswaldo Cabrera and Aaron Hicks as their left fielder. And I also don't think they're going to go in with Andrew McCutchen or someone like that. I really do think that there's someone bigger coming.
It's got to. If here's my lineup, and I know Judge usually bats second. I hate Judge batting second. So I have Bader as the leadoff hitter. I have this unknown left fielder batting second. All right, you want to move Judge to second, then I'll move this unknown left fielder somewhere else. But Bader, the unknown guy, Judge, Rizzo, Stanton, Torres. There's your top 6. Now, if the left fielder guy's pretty good and he's a good hitter and he's a really good lefty bat, because the only lefty bat so far is Rizzo, I think that's a solid lineup. I think
Bader up in the high part of the lineup is a little bit much.
Okay.
If you look at his Statcast numbers, they're not great.
Oh, talk to Andy Singer. We'll have to get him on here because Andy Singer sings his praises up one side, down the other. But
I think Bader's a great player when you consider defense. I just don't think. I think if he's your leadoff hitter, you're doing something wrong.
Okay, interesting. He did bat leadoff, I think, one day in the playoffs.
He did, but I mean, that lineup that's not saying much in that lineup.
No, well, but the bottom 3 is what really concerns me. Donaldson, who could come back and have a solid year batting. I mean, that's happened a million times before. But then you got Trevino. He's not going to hit. And then you got Peraza, who might hit, but I don't think the Yankees can go into a season counting on him hitting.
No, you love maybe your leadoff hitter at the end of the season, maybe. But even then, Peraza Peraza is a Harrison Bader type, right? Like if he might hit a little bit, and that could be nice, but he's going to make his money on defense.
So the Yankees don't have a leadoff hitter by my line, by the players I'm looking at, unless you go with DJ LeMahieu, who still has his toe injury.
Yep.
And I'm saying to myself, when I look at these guys, the guy who should bat lead off is Bader, and then we need somebody who's a left-handed hitter who
and then
can bat second and play left field.
Of finding a spot for Torres, Donaldson, and LeMahieu, right? This is why left field makes so much sense. None of those guys are going to play left field.
Correct.
And you need someone to do it.
And you need another lefty bat. You've got one.
Yep. No, I agree. Look, I think if I had a prediction, I'm going to predict that they trade for Reynolds. He makes so much sense. He doesn't make a lot of sense to the Pirates, frankly. I mean, he's an older player. He's only going to lose value as time goes on. The Pirates aren't anywhere near contending. I know the fans in Pittsburgh will be disappointed that that they're continuing to rebuild, but that's not going to change the reality that with or without Reynolds, they're going to continue to rebuild. And if they get a good trade for him, that will make that go faster. It really does feel like they're working out a trade with Reynolds right now, and they're just trying to get the 3-team deal, which is complicated, to happen. At that point, once that happens, let's hopefully the cost isn't too high. Then you start talking about Reynolds as what version of Reynolds are you going to get, right? Maybe you get Reynolds, which would be a great leadoff hitter. Maybe you get last year Reynolds, who would be better than they had last year at leadoff, but still only a slightly above average major league hitter. And you hope he returns on defense. I don't think that's going to be a problem. I think Reynolds is really good. I think he's that kind of contact player that we've been begging for. But it isn't as cut and dry saying Reynolds solves everything. But I do think Reynolds is the player that they're trading for.
Reynolds also can play center field because that's what he's basically been a lot. And Harrison Bader, I think a lot of people don't realize this. He's a free agent at the end of the year.
Yep.
A guy who's missed a lot of time, missed a month when the Yankees got him, or a month and a half or so, which frustrated me to no end. And the Yankees going to have to make a big decision on this guy. Like, do we invest long-term in Harrison Bader, who's, I think, is age 29 this year, so he'll be 30 next year, or else who's going to play center field in 2024? Now, he hope Dominguez is ready, or one of these other guys down at the minor leagues, Everson Pereira or whatever. But
yep.
Boy,
they have a lot of good left field options. They don't really have a lot of good center field options. And so having Brian Reynolds as a backup center fielder, I think could be a really big deal. The other player, you want crazy ideas. Let's say this all falls through. They can't find a real stopgap player. My other crazy idea is Anthony Volpe. Volpe's future is not at shortstop because Oswaldo Peraza's future is at shortstop. And frankly, a lot of people think that his future is at second base no matter what. He doesn't have a great arm, but he's fast. He's a smart guy. He's got good instincts. And if you had to play him for one season in left field, I don't think that's the worst use of his talents. He's already played at AAA. He probably could use some more time at AAA. But I wouldn't be shocked if they get a stopgap guy who fails. Let's say they get Andrew McCutchen, and McCutchen looks awful for the first month and a half, 2 months. I guarantee you, I would bet money that Anthony Volpe starts taking reps in left field. And I would not be shocked to see him hit enough that, like Oswaldo Cabrera, he's faster than Cabrera, so maybe he looks even better out there. But, like Oswaldo Cabrera looks, like an infielder playing the outfield, but does it well enough, and is your leadoff hitter.
The Yankees had a second baseman in their system, who they also tried at third base, who became a heck of a left fielder. His name, Roy White. Yankees had a shortstop who became a heck of a center fielder. His name, Bobby Mercer. And before that, the Yankees had a shortstop. They only played 1 year at shortstop, his first year in rookie ball, but they moved him to the outfield too, and his name was Mickey Mantle. So what you're saying isn't unheard of, where you take a prospect who has certain tools and you say, let's have you play in the outfield.
And I think Volpe is, if you had to bet on a player adjusting well, I mean, Cabrera is a guy you could bet on adjusting well just because of his attitude. He's got this very positive can-do attitude. Volpe is a guy who at every step in the minor leagues has been a guy who has performed better than expected. That is, people looked at him and they saw him being drafted in the first round. They said the guy's a pretty good shortstop, but they didn't see him as a top 10 prospect in terms of tools. And then, he's pretty fast. They didn't see him as a guy who would steal 50 stolen bases. He's got pretty good power, but they didn't see him as a guy who could hit 30 home runs. He did all that. And, I just wouldn't be shocked to see him play greater than the sum of his parts if they stick him in left field.
It will be fun. Do you predict, last thing real quick, because we're going to have to go off the air in 1 second. Will the deal be done before next Monday's show?
No.
I don't think so either.
Christmas holiday.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Bronx. No, it's not the Bronx Beat Podcast. It's the Start Spreading the News podcast. Don't forget to watch EJ or listen to EJ in the Bronx Beat Podcast. You can also get them on Substack. Read Start Spreading the News every single day. Thank you for watching. We'll be right back here next Monday night, 9 p.m. here on the Northeast Streaming Sports Network. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. We'll see you here next Monday, January the 2nd, I believe. Have a good night.